The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Meadowbrook Community Center, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. Sarah Martinez stood near the entrance, clutching her worn leather music folder against her chest. At 23 years old, she had learned to keep her expectations low when it came to these volunteer events. She had been playing piano since she was 6, but life had a way of humbling even the most dedicated musicians. The community center smelled like old books and fresh coffee. Elderly residents shuffled around the main hall, some using walkers, others moving with surprising energy for their age. The weekly talent showcase was something the center director, Mrs. Patterson, had organized to bring joy to the residents. Sarah had volunteered to accompany anyone who wanted to sing or perform, thinking it would be a simple afternoon of playing basic melodies. Mrs. Patterson, a cheerful woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled into a neat bun, rushed over to Sarah with her clipboard. "Oh, thank goodness you're here. We have quite a lineup today. Nothing too complicated, just some simple songs the residents love. You know, the classics." Sarah nodded and made her way to the upright piano sitting against the far wall. The instrument had seen better days. Some of the keys stuck slightly, and it was probably a half step out of tune, but it would do for what she assumed would be straightforward accompaniment work. She set her folder on the music stand and began doing some warm-up scales, her fingers moving mechanically across the keys. The residents began taking their seats in the folding chairs arranged in neat rows. There was excited chatter in the air. An elderly woman in a purple cardigan waved enthusiastically at Sarah. A man with thick glasses and a veteran's cap gave her a thumbs up. These people were so genuinely happy to be here, and Sarah felt her initial reluctance melting away. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Mrs. Patterson clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "Welcome, welcome, everyone. We have a wonderful afternoon planned. Our talented pianist Sarah is here to help make some beautiful music with us." She consulted her clipboard. "First up, we have Margaret singing Moon River. Then Harold will recite a poem, and then—" She paused, squinting at her notes. "Oh yes, we have a special performer. Mr. Chen has requested to play something on the piano." Sarah's ears perked up at this. Someone else wanted to play? That was unusual. Most volunteers came to accompany singers, not to share the piano bench. She scanned the room, trying to figure out which person was Mr. Chen. "Don't worry, dear," Mrs. Patterson said quietly to Sarah. "He just wants to play a simple tune, something from his childhood, I believe. Should only take a few minutes." The showcase began with Margaret's wobbly but heartfelt rendition of Moon River. Sarah accompanied her gently, following the elderly woman's uncertain tempo with practiced ease. The audience clapped warmly. Harold's poem about his late wife brought tears to several eyes. A trio of ladies sang a barbershop-style arrangement of Sweet Caroline that had everyone clapping along. Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying the afternoon. There was something pure about these performances. Nobody was trying to impress anyone. They were simply sharing moments of joy and memory through music and words. Then Mrs. Patterson announced, "And now we have Mr. James Chen, who will be playing a piece on the piano." From the back of the room, a figure began making his way forward. Sarah watched as an elderly man, probably in his late 70s, walked slowly toward the piano. He was thin, with silver hair neatly combed back, and wore a simple gray cardigan over a white shirt. His movements were careful, deliberate. He used a cane, but there was a certain dignity in the way he carried himself. Sarah stood up from the piano bench, assuming he would take her place. Mr. Chen gave her a small, polite nod. His eyes were dark and thoughtful, with deep lines at the corners that suggested a lifetime of both smiling and sorrow. "Please, don't go far," he said softly, his accent carrying traces of another language, another homeland. "I may need you to turn pages." Sarah was surprised. Page turning meant sheet music. Sheet music meant something more complex than the simple tune Mrs. Patterson had mentioned. She felt a flutter of curiosity. What was this quiet man planning to play? Mr. Chen settled onto the bench with some difficulty, positioning his cane against the piano's side. From inside his cardigan, he withdrew several sheets of music, carefully protected in a clear plastic folder. The pages looked old, yellowed at the edges with handwritten notes in the margins. He placed them on the music stand with hands that trembled slightly. Whether from age or emotion, Sarah couldn't tell. The room had grown quieter. The residents seemed to sense that something different was about to happen. Even the staff members who had been tidying up in the back stopped what they were doing. Mr. Chen sat for a moment in silence, his fingers hovering over the keys. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Sarah, standing beside the piano, leaned slightly to look at the sheet music. Her eyes widened. This wasn't a simple children's tune. The notation was dense, complex. She recognized the composer's name at the top, Chopin. Before she could process this information, Mr. Chen's fingers descended onto the keys. The first notes rang out clear and pure, cutting through the musty air of the community center like light through darkness. It was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, No. 2, one of the most beautiful and technically demanding pieces in the piano repertoire. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The transformation was immediate and complete. The frail elderly man who had shuffled forward with a cane had disappeared. In his place sat a master pianist, his age-spotted hands moving across the keys with a grace and certainty that defied his physical limitations. The trembling was gone. Every note was precisely placed, perfectly weighted. The melody floated through the room like a living thing, tender and yearning. Mr. Chen's body swayed gently with the music, his eyes still closed. Completely absorbed in the world of sound he was creating, Sarah stood transfixed, her job of page-turning forgotten for the moment. She had heard this piece performed by professionals, had played it herself in her student days. But there was something different about this performance, something that went beyond technical proficiency. This was music that came from somewhere deeper than training. This was a soul speaking. The music filled every corner of the community center. Sarah watched in amazement as Mr. Chen's fingers danced across the keys with impossible fluidity. The difficult runs and ornamentations that had taken her months to master flowed from his hands as naturally as breathing. The residents sat absolutely still, many with their mouths slightly open, completely captivated by what they were hearing. Sarah's mind raced with questions. Who was this man? Where had he learned to play like this? This wasn't the playing of an amateur who had taken lessons as a child. This was the playing of someone who had dedicated their life to the instrument. Every phrase was shaped with intention, every dynamic shift meaningful. The rubato, the way he subtly pushed and pulled the tempo, was masterful. It took decades to develop that kind of musical intuition. Mrs. Patterson stood frozen by the doorway, her clipboard hanging forgotten at her side. Her expression mirrored Sarah's own shock and wonder. Clearly, she had had no idea what Mr. Chen was capable of. The simple tune she had mentioned was turning out to be anything but simple. The nocturne's middle section arrived, with its delicate filigree of notes cascading like water. Mr. Chen leaned into the piano, coaxing each note out with perfect touch. His fingers barely seemed to press the keys, yet the sound that emerged was rich and full. Sarah knew how difficult this was to achieve. Too much pressure and the music became harsh. Too little and it disappeared into nothing. Mr. Chen had found that perfect balance that all pianists sought but few achieved. Sarah glanced at the audience. An elderly woman in the front row had tears streaming down her face. She wasn't crying from sadness, Sarah realized, but from the sheer beauty of what she was hearing. Next to her, a man sat with his eyes closed, a peaceful smile on his face. Others leaned forward in their chairs, as if trying to get physically closer to the music. The piece moved toward its climax, the melody rising and swelling with emotion. Mr. Chen's shoulders lifted with the crescendo, his whole body engaged in the act of creating sound. Then just as smoothly he brought the dynamics back down, guiding the music toward its quiet conclusion. The final phrases were played with such tenderness that Sarah felt her own eyes beginning to sting with tears. The last note hung in the air for a long moment. Mr. Chen kept his hands on the keys, his eyes still closed, letting the sound fade naturally. The room remained silent even after the note had completely disappeared. It was as if no one wanted to break the spell that had been cast. Then, slowly, Mr. Chen lifted his hands from the keyboard. He opened his eyes and took a deep breath, seeming to return from wherever the music had taken him. He looked older again, more tired. The transformation reversed as quickly as it had occurred. The applause started slowly, then built into something powerful. The residents were on their feet, those who could stand doing so with the help of walkers and canes. They clapped and clapped, some wiping tears from their eyes, others shouting, "Bravo!" Mrs. Patterson was clapping so hard her clipboard had fallen to the floor. Sarah found herself applauding too, her hands coming together automatically. She was still processing what she had just witnessed. This was concert hall level playing. This was conservatory trained, possibly professional level skill. What was someone with this ability doing in a community center, labeled as someone who wanted to play a simple tune? Mr. Chen gave a small, humble bow from the piano bench. He seemed almost embarrassed by the enthusiasm of the response. When the applause finally began to die down, he carefully gathered his sheet music, folding it back into its protective cover. He retrieved his cane and began the slow process of standing up. Sarah moved quickly to his side. "Let me help you," she said, offering her arm. Mr. Chen accepted with a grateful nod. As he steadied himself, he looked at Sarah with those thoughtful dark eyes. "Thank you for being here," he said quietly. "It has been a very long time since I played for an audience." "A long time?" Sarah couldn't help herself. "But you play like—" that was extraordinary. "Are you a professional pianist?" A complicated expression crossed Mr. Chen's face. There was sadness there, but also something else. Pride, perhaps, or memory. "I was," he said simply. "Many years ago. In another life." Before Sarah could ask more, Mrs. Patterson rushed over, her face flushed with excitement. "Mr. Chen!" "I had no idea. That was absolutely magnificent. Why didn't you tell me you could play like that?" Mr. Chen gave a gentle smile. "You asked if I wanted to play something. I did not think my past credentials were relevant. I simply wanted to touch the piano again. But where did you train? Where did you perform?" Mrs. Patterson was full of questions now. "It was a long time ago," Mr. Chen repeated, his voice taking on a tone that suggested he didn't wish to say more. "In Shanghai before I came to America. But that life ended many years ago." He began to shuffle toward his seat, clearly indicating that the conversation was over. Sarah and Mrs. Patterson exchanged glances. There was obviously a story here, a big one, but it was equally clear that Mr. Chen wasn't ready to share it. The showcase continued with a few more acts, but nothing could match what had just happened. The energy in the room had changed. People kept glancing at Mr. Chen, who sat quietly in the back row, his cane resting against his knee, looking like any other elderly resident. After the event ended, Sarah helped fold up chairs while the residents mingled over cookies and tea. She kept stealing glances at Mr. Chen, who stood alone by the window looking out at the parking lot. She wanted to talk to him, to ask him so many questions, but something about his solitary stance made her hesitate. "You should go talk to him," Mrs. Patterson said, appearing at Sarah's elbow. "I've been the director here for 8 years. Mr. Chen has been a resident for 3 of those years. He's always polite, always quiet, but he keeps to himself. I've never seen him at any of our music events before today. This is the first time he's ever participated in anything." "Really?" Sarah looked at the elderly man with new curiosity. "Why do you think he came today?" Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "I don't know. But I do know that whatever brought him here, whatever made him want to play today, it was important. You're a musician, Sarah. Maybe you can connect with him in a way the rest of us can't." Sarah set down the chair she was holding and walked over to the window. Mr. Chen seemed lost in thought, his reflection faint in the glass. "Mr. Chen?" Sarah said softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned slowly, and when he saw her, his expression softened. "Ah, the page turner, though I fear I forgot to signal you when to turn the pages." "My apologies," Sarah laughed. "I don't think you needed any help. That was one of the most beautiful performances I've ever heard." "You are kind to say so." "I'm not being kind. I'm being honest. I studied piano for 15 years. I know what I heard." Sarah paused, then took a chance. Would you be willing to tell me about your music? About how you learned to play like that?" Mr. Chen studied Sarah's face for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she was genuinely interested or simply being polite. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he gestured to a small couch near the window. "Perhaps we could sit for a moment. These old bones tire easily." They settled onto the couch, and Mr. Chen arranged his cane carefully beside him. For a while he said nothing, just looked out the window at the afternoon sunlight. Sarah waited, sensing that pushing him would be the wrong approach. Finally he began to speak. "I was born in Shanghai in 1947, just before the revolution changed everything in China. My father was a merchant, relatively successful. We were not wealthy, but comfortable enough. When I was 5 years old, my mother took me to hear a concert. A Russian pianist was touring, and she somehow managed to get tickets." His eyes grew distant with memory. I had never heard anything like it. The piano seemed alive, like it was singing, crying, laughing all at once. I remember tugging on my mother's sleeve and telling her that I wanted to do that. I wanted to make the piano sing. Most parents would have dismissed such talk from a 5-year-old, Mr. Chen continued. But my mother took me seriously. She found a teacher, an old man who had studied in Vienna before the war. Master Liu was very strict, very demanding. He made me practice scales for 6 months before he would let me learn a single real piece. Sarah smiled, recognizing the traditional approach. That must have been frustrating. It was torture, Mr. Chen agreed with a slight smile. But Master Liu knew what he was doing. He was building a foundation that would last a lifetime. By the time I was 8, I was playing Mozart sonatas. By 10, I was working on Beethoven. By 12, I performed Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto with the Shanghai Youth Orchestra. 12 years old? Sarah's eyes widened. That concerto was notoriously difficult. I lived at the piano, Mr. Chen said simply. 6, sometimes 8 hours a day? My parents worried I was missing out on childhood, on normal things. But I was not unhappy. The piano was not a burden to me. It was my voice, my way of understanding the world. He paused, his expression darkening. Then came the Cultural Revolution in 1966. I was 19 years old, studying at the Shanghai Conservatory. Everything changed overnight. Western classical music was declared bourgeois, corrupting. The conservatory was shut down. Professors were sent to work in factories and farms. Students were dispersed. Sarah had read about the Cultural Revolution in history class, but hearing it from someone who had lived through it brought the reality into sharp focus. What happened to you? I was sent to a collective farm in the countryside. For 8 years, I picked vegetables and hauled water. There were no pianos, no music. Anyone caught with Western music scores could be severely punished. I saw people beaten for less. His hands, resting on his lap, clenched slightly at the memory. One night, about 2 years into my time at the farm, I found an old woman crying in the dormitory. Her name was Grandmother Joe. I asked what was wrong, and she told me she was trying to remember a lullaby her mother used to sing to her. She could not quite recall the melody, and it was breaking her heart. Mr. Chen's voice grew softer. I hummed it for her. I do not know how I knew it, but somehow I did. She smiled through her tears and said I had a gift for music. Then she asked if I missed playing. I told her I missed it like I would miss breathing. Grandmother Joe became my friend. She was educated from a good family, also sent to the farm for re-education. She told me that no matter what they took from us on the outside, they could not take what we held in our minds and hearts. She suggested I practice piano in my head, running through pieces mentally, imagining every note, every movement of my fingers. Sarah leaned forward, fascinated. Did it work? I thought she was crazy at first, Mr. Chen admitted. How could imagining piano practice be the same as real practice? But I had nothing else. So every night, lying on my bunk after a day of hard labor, I would close my eyes and play. I would start with scales, just as Master Liu had taught me, then etudes, then full pieces. I played through my entire repertoire, note by note, in my mind. For 8 years, that was my practice. No piano, no sound, just memory and imagination. My fingers would sometimes move on their own while I lay there, playing invisible keys. The other workers thought I was strange, but they left me alone. Mr. Chen's expression shifted, showing something between pain and wonder. When the Cultural Revolution finally ended in 1976, things slowly began to change. The conservatory reopened. I was 29 years old by then, nearly 30. Many thought I was too old, that 8 years away from the instrument would have destroyed any skill I once had. But they were wrong, Sarah said. Beginning to understand they were wrong, Mr. Chen confirmed. When I finally sat at a piano again, it was like greeting an old friend. Yes, my fingers were stiff at first. Yes, the calluses were gone and I had to rebuild them. But the music was still there, all of it, preserved perfectly in my mind. Within 6 months, I was playing better than I had before. The mental practice had worked, more than worked. It had deepened my understanding. When you practice physically, you can rely on muscle memory, on repetition without thought. But when you practice mentally, you must truly know every note, every phrase, every harmonic progression. You must understand the architecture of the music. Those 8 years forced me to know the music in a way I never had before. Mr. Chen shifted slightly on the couch, his gaze returning to the window. I joined the conservatory as a teacher. For the next 15 years, I taught piano and performed occasionally. I married a wonderful woman, a violinist. We had a daughter. Life was good, finally good after so much hardship. Then my wife became ill. He said quietly, "Cancer." The treatment options in China at that time were limited. My daughter, who was studying medicine in America, invited us to come. She said the hospitals here might be able to help. We came to America in 1994. My wife received treatment, and for a while it seemed to work. We stayed with my daughter in California. But the cancer returned. She passed away in 1998. Sarah reached out and gently touched his hand. "I'm so sorry." Mr. Chen nodded, acknowledging her sympathy. After she died, I could not play. Every time I sat at the piano, I heard her violin accompanying me, and the pain was too great. I told myself it was temporary, that time would heal. But months became years, and still I could not touch the instrument. My daughter worried about me. I was depressed, isolated. She convinced me to move here, to this community center's residential facility. She thought being around people would help. And it has somewhat. But still I could not play. Sarah sat quietly, absorbing everything Mr. Chen had told her. The weight of his story, the decades of dedication, loss, and silence hung in the air between them. She wanted to ask the obvious question but hesitated, not wanting to seem pushy. Mr. Chen seemed to read her thoughts. A small knowing smile appeared on his weathered face. "You are wondering why today? Why after 27 years of silence did I suddenly decide to play?" "Only if you want to tell me," Sarah said carefully. He looked down at his hands, studying them as if seeing them for the first time. The skin was thin and age-spotted, the knuckles slightly swollen with arthritis. "Last week I received news that my daughter is expecting her first child. I am going to be a grandfather." Sarah smiled. "That's wonderful news, congratulations." "Thank you." "But the news made me think about legacy, about what we pass down to the next generation. My daughter knows I was once a pianist, but she was very young when I stopped playing. She has only vague memories of hearing me practice. My future grandchild will never know that part of me at all unless something changes." Mr. Chen paused, gathering his thoughts. I began to wonder what I wanted this child to know about me. Did I want to be remembered only as a sad old man who gave up the thing he loved most? Or did I want to be remembered as someone who found his way back to beauty, even after great loss? 3 nights ago I had a dream, he continued, his voice taking on a different quality, more animated. I dreamed I was back in Shanghai in Master Lu's studio. He was old then, but in my dream he was ancient, impossibly old. He looked at me with those stern eyes of his and said, "James, why are you wasting my teaching? I spent years building your foundation. The foundation does not crumble just because you walk away from it. It waits for you to return." When I woke up, I could not stop thinking about those words. Even though it was just a dream, it felt like Master Lu was speaking to me across time and death. That morning, I walked past the community center's main hall. I do that sometimes just to stretch my legs. The piano was sitting there as it always is. But this time I stopped. I stood there for a long time just looking at it. Mr. Chen's hands moved slightly, his fingers twitching as if remembering. I thought about what Master Lu said in the dream. About foundations. About not wasting. And I thought about my grandchild who will be born in a few months. What story would I have to tell this child? That great-grandfather once did something beautiful but gave it up? Or that great-grandfather found his way back? "So yesterday I spoke to Mrs. Patterson," he said. "I told her I would like to play something at today's showcase. She was happy, asked me what I would play. I said a simple tune because I did not want to make a big fuss. I did not know if I could even do it. 27 years is a long time. I practiced last night in my room, playing on my desk, no sound, just like on the farm. And this morning I woke up and decided today was the day." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. "And you chose the Chopin Nocturne? That's not a simple piece." "No," Mr. Chen agreed. "But it was the last piece my wife and I performed together before she became too ill to play. She would accompany me on violin while I played piano. That nocturne was her favorite. I thought if I was going to break my silence, it should be with something that honored her memory. When I sat down at the piano today," he continued, "I was terrified. What if the music was gone? What if my fingers would not cooperate? What if I had built this moment up in my mind only to fail publicly?" "But then you started playing," Sarah prompted gently. "But then I started playing," Mr. Chen echoed. "And it was like no time had passed at all. The foundation Master Lu built was still there. just as he promised in my dream. And more than that, I felt my wife's presence. I know that sounds foolish to young ears. It doesn't sound foolish at all, Sarah said firmly. Mr. Chen looked at her gratefully. I felt her there in every note. Not in a sad way, but in a way that celebrated what we had shared. For those few minutes, I was not a lonely widower. I was not an old man who had given up. I was a pianist again. I was myself again. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Around them, the community center was emptying out. Residents were heading back to their rooms. Staff members were cleaning up the last of the refreshments. What will you do now? Sarah asked. Will you keep playing? Mr. Chen considered the question carefully. I think I must. Not because I want to perform or seek recognition. Those days are past. But because I owe it to Master Lu's memory, to my wife's memory, and to my own soul. The music is part of who I am. Denying it is like denying my own breath. Would you? Sarah hesitated, then pushed forward. Would you consider letting me come hear you play again? Maybe we could even play together sometime. I would love to learn from you. Mr. Chen looked surprised, then pleased. You would want that? A young person like yourself learning from a rusty old man? Rusty? Sarah laughed. Mr. Chen, what I heard today was not rusty. What I heard today was mastery. I've been playing piano for years, but I've never connected with the music the way you do. I would be honored if you would share some of your knowledge with me. A spark of something that looked like joy crossed Mr. Chen's face. Then perhaps we could arrange something. I come to the community center most mornings. The piano is usually available. If you were to visit, say on Tuesday or Thursday mornings, we might spend some time at the keyboard together. I would love that, Sarah said immediately. I work afternoons and evenings, so mornings are perfect. Mrs. Patterson appeared, approaching them with a warm smile. Mr. Chen, I hate to interrupt, but the van is getting ready to take residents back to their rooms. Can I give you a ride? Thank you, yes. Mr. Chen stood slowly, accepting his cane. He looked down at Sarah. Tuesday morning, then? Around 10 o'clock? I'll be here, Sarah promised. As she watched Mr. Chen make his way to the door, moving carefully with his cane, Sarah felt a strange mixture of emotions. She had come to this showcase expecting a simple afternoon of accompanying amateur singers. Instead, she had witnessed something profound, a moment of resurrection, of a soul reclaiming a lost part of itself. She thought about her own relationship with music. She had been playing piano for years, but lately, it had started to feel mechanical, like going through motions rather than creating something alive. She practiced her pieces, performed when asked, taught beginner students. But when was the last time she had truly felt connected to the music the way Mr. Chen obviously was? Maybe this unexpected meeting was exactly what she needed. Maybe learning from someone who had lost music and found it again would help her rediscover her own passion. Maybe Mr. Chen's story about foundations was meant for her as much as for him. Sarah gathered her things and headed for the exit. The afternoon sun was lower now, casting golden light across the parking lot. She pulled out her phone and opened her calendar, marking Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. Then she sent a text to her best friend. You won't believe what happened today. I met the most incredible pianist. I'll tell you everything later. As she drove home, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the performance. The way Mr. Chen's hands had moved across the keys with such certainty, the emotion that had poured through every phrase, the transformation from frail elderly man to master musician and back again. It was like watching someone put on and take off a costume, except the costume was made of music and memory. Tuesday morning arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze. Sarah found herself awake earlier than usual, nervous energy coursing through her. She had spent the past few days thinking about Mr. Chen, researching the Cultural Revolution and its impact on artists, and practicing some of her more challenging pieces. She wanted to be prepared, though she wasn't entirely sure what to expect from their meeting. She arrived at the community center at 9:45, not wanting to be late. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows differently than it had during the afternoon showcase. Everything looked fresher, newer. A few elderly residents were already in the main hall, some reading newspapers, others playing cards at a corner table. Sarah made her way to the piano and sat down, running through some warm-up exercises while she waited. Her fingers felt stiff and she silently cursed herself for being nervous. This wasn't a performance or an audition. This was just two pianists sharing their love of music. At precisely 10 o'clock, she heard the familiar tap of a cane on the floor. Mr. Chen appeared at the entrance to the main hall, moving slowly but steadily. When he saw Sarah, his face brightened. He was dressed neatly in pressed slacks and a navy cardigan, his silver hair carefully combed. "Good morning, Sarah. You are very punctual. That is the mark of a serious musician." "Good morning, Mr. Chen. I've been looking forward to this all weekend." He made his way to the piano and settled onto the bench beside her. Up close, Sarah could see the deep lines in his face more clearly, each one like a chapter in the story of his life. His hands, though marked by age, still held a certain elegance. "So," he said, arranging his cane against the piano, "tell me about your musical journey. How did you come to the piano?" Sarah found herself telling him about her childhood, about begging her parents for piano lessons after hearing a concert at school, about her dedicated teacher, Mrs. Hoffman, who had guided her through all the grade levels and competitions. She talked about considering music school but ultimately choosing a more practical degree in business, keeping piano as something she did on the side. Mr. Chen listened carefully, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, considering, "Do you regret your choice, not pursuing music professionally?" The question caught Sarah off guard. No one had ever asked her that directly. "I don't know," she admitted. "Sometimes I wonder what might have been. But the reality is that making a living as a musician is incredibly difficult. I have friends from my competition days who went to conservatory. Most of them are struggling, teaching lessons, playing at restaurants and hotels. I have a stable job, I can pay my rent, and I still get to play music." "That is practical thinking," Mr. Chen said. "Very American, very sensible. But let me ask you something else. When you play now, do you feel joy, or do you feel obligation?" Sarah opened her mouth to answer quickly, then stopped. The question was more complicated than it seemed. "Both, I think. There are moments of joy, definitely, but lately, more often I feel like I'm just going through the motions, playing the same pieces I've played dozens of times, accompanying singers who don't really care about the music, teaching beginners who are only taking lessons because their parents make them." "Ah," Mr. Chen said, as if she had confirmed something he suspected. "You have lost the connection. This happens to many musicians, professional or not. We become technicians instead of artists. We focus on playing the notes correctly but forget to ask why we are playing them at all." He gestured to the piano. "Play something for me. Anything you like." Sarah thought for a moment and chose a Debussy prelude, one she had performed in a recital a few months ago. She knew it well, had all the technical aspects down perfectly. She launched into it, her fingers moving accurately through the cascading passages, the rhythmic patterns precise. When she finished, she looked at Mr. Chen expectantly, hoping for praise. Instead, he looked thoughtful, almost sad. "That was technically perfect," he said carefully. "Every note in the right place, every rhythm correct. But Sarah, I must be honest with you. I heard nothing in that performance." Sarah felt a flush of embarrassment and defensiveness. "What do you mean?" "I didn't miss any notes." "No, you did not miss any notes," Mr. Chen agreed. "But you also did not say anything. Music is a language. When we speak, we do not simply pronounce words correctly. We use tone, emphasis, emotion to convey meaning. Your playing just now was like someone reading a dictionary. The words were all correct, but there was no story, no purpose, no soul." The criticism stung, but Sarah recognized the truth in it. She had felt disconnected while playing, going through familiar motions without really thinking about what the music meant. "Let me show you something," Mr. Chen said. He positioned his hands over the keys and played the same Debussy prelude. But it was completely different. The same notes transformed into something alive. Where Sarah had played passages, Mr. Chen played phrases, each one leading naturally to the next. Where she had executed rhythms, he created conversation. The music breathed, paused, surged forward, and retreated, all with organic naturalness. When he finished, Sarah sat in stunned silence. "How did you do that?" "We played the same notes." "No," Mr. Chen corrected gently. "We played the same written symbols. But music is not the symbols on the page. Music is what those symbols represent, the emotions and images and ideas they convey." Debussy was trying to paint a picture with sound. He was influenced by impressionist painters, by nature, by fleeting moments of beauty. When you play his music, you must ask yourself, what is he trying to paint? What do I see when I play these notes? He pointed to a particular passage in the music. "Here, these ascending arpeggios. What are they? Just technical exercises? Or are they sunlight filtering through water, Are they mist rising from a lake at dawn? If you can see the image, hear it in your mind, then your fingers will naturally shape the sound to match. Sarah stared at the music with new eyes. She had always focused on getting the notes right, on maintaining steady tempo, on remembering the dynamics marked in the score. She had never stopped to think about what story the music was telling. Try it again, Mr. Chen suggested. But this time, before you play, close your eyes. Imagine a scene. Maybe a garden in early morning, maybe a seashore, maybe anything that speaks to you. Hold that image in your mind and then try to paint it with the piano. Sarah closed her eyes. She thought about a lake near her childhood home, a place her family used to visit on summer mornings. She remembered the way mist would hover over the water, the way sunlight would break through trees, the peaceful silence broken only by occasional bird calls. She opened her eyes and began to play. This time she wasn't thinking about correct notes or proper technique. She was thinking about that lake, that morning light, that sense of peaceful solitude. Her hands moved differently, with more freedom, more subtlety. The music flowed instead of marching. When she finished, she looked at Mr. Chen. He was smiling, really smiling, his eyes bright. Better, much better. I heard something that time. I heard you, your memory, your feeling. That is the beginning of real musicianship. They spent the next hour working through the piece, with Mr. Chen pointing out places where Sarah could enhance the imagery, where she could take more time or less time, where she could use different touch to create different colors. He had her play single phrases over and over, not to perfect the technique, but to deepen the expression. You see, he explained, when I was on the farm during the Cultural Revolution, practicing in my mind, I had nothing but time to think about what each piece meant. I could not rely on muscle memory or habit. I had to truly understand the architecture, the emotion, the purpose of every phrase. That is why when I finally played again, the music was deeper. The years of silence forced me to know the music from the inside out. The morning flew by faster than Sarah expected. By the time she looked at her phone, it was nearly noon. Mr. Chen looked tired but content, and she insisted they stop for the day. You must be exhausted, she said. I didn't mean to keep you here so long. Not exhausted, Mr. Chen corrected. Fulfilled. There is a difference. Teaching you today reminded me of something I had forgotten. Music is meant to be shared, passed down. Master Lu shared his knowledge with me, and now I can share what I learned with you. This is how the art survives. As they were preparing to leave, Mrs. Patterson approached with several other residents. Mr. Chen, we were wondering if you might play for us again sometime. Everyone has been talking about your performance last week. Some of our residents who couldn't make it to the showcase are disappointed they missed it. Mr. Chen looked uncertain. I do not wish to make a spectacle. It wouldn't be a spectacle, Mrs. Patterson assured him. Just sharing your gift with people who would appreciate it. Maybe once a month. A short recital? Sarah saw something shift in Mr. Chen's expression. He was tempted, she could tell, but also hesitant. She touched his arm gently. I think it's a wonderful idea, and if you'd like, I could accompany you on some pieces. We could play duets. His eyes met hers, and she saw gratitude there. You would do that? I would be honored. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Mr. Chen met twice a week at the community center. Their sessions became a highlight of Sarah's week. Mr. Chen introduced her to pieces she had never explored, sharing stories about composers and their inspirations. He taught her about the Chinese musical traditions that had influenced his early understanding of melody and rhythm. More importantly, he taught her to stop and think about the meaning behind the music. Every composer leaves us clues, he would say. The tempo marking, the dynamic changes, the harmonic progressions. These are not arbitrary. They tell us about the emotion, the story the composer wants to convey. Our job is to be detectives, to uncover these clues and bring them to life. Sarah found her own playing transforming. Pieces she had performed mechanically for years suddenly became alive with new meaning. She started paying attention to details she had previously glossed over. A slight ritardando here, a crescendo there. These were not just technical markings but emotional signposts. One Thursday morning, Mr. Chen arrived with a worn folder. Inside were handwritten sheet music pages yellowed with age. These are arrangements I made years ago, he explained. Chinese folk songs adapted for piano. I thought perhaps we could learn one together, play it as a duet at the next showcase. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, with pentatonic scales that sounded both foreign and familiar to Sarah's Western-trained ears. As they worked through it together, Mr. Chen told her the story behind the song. It was a traditional melody about a daughter leaving home to marry, her mother's sadness and hope mixed together. My wife used to sing this song, Mr. Chen said softly. I arranged it for piano and violin so we could perform it together. After she passed, I could not bear to look at it. But now, with you helping me rediscover these pieces, I think I can play it again, not with sadness but with appreciation for what we had. Sarah felt honored that he was sharing something so personal with her. They practiced the duet carefully, Mr. Chen taking the melodic upper part while Sarah provided harmonic support in the lower register. The interweaving of their parts created something greater than either could achieve alone. The monthly recital became a regular event at the community center. Word spread beyond the residents, and soon family members started attending. Local musicians from the community heard about Mr. Chen and came to listen. After one recital, an elderly gentleman approached Mr. Chen with tears in his eyes. I studied at the Shanghai Conservatory in the 1970s, the man said in Mandarin. After the reopening, you were one of my professors. Professor Chen, you changed my life. You taught me that music could survive anything, even the darkest times. Mr. Chen seemed stunned. They spoke in rapid Mandarin for several minutes, reminiscing about the conservatory, about students and colleagues. Sarah watched, not understanding the words but feeling the emotion. After the man left, Mr. Chen sat quietly for a long moment. I had forgotten, he finally said. I had forgotten about the students, about the ones I taught after returning to the piano. I was so focused on what I had lost, the years stolen by the revolution, the silence after my wife's death. But that man reminded me that those teaching years mattered. The music continued through them. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah noticed changes in both herself and Mr. Chen. He stood a little straighter, moved with slightly more energy. The sadness that had seemed to hang around him like a cloak had lifted. He smiled more often, made jokes during their practice sessions. For Sarah, the changes were internal but just as profound. She found herself approaching her regular work with music differently. When accompanying singers now, she really listened to them, adjusted her playing to support their voices. When teaching her beginning students, she talked to them about why they were learning each piece, what story the music told. One day, after a particularly satisfying practice session, Mr. Chen said something that stayed with Sarah. You know, when I first stopped playing after my wife died, I thought I was honoring her memory by preserving our music together in silence. But I was wrong. The best way to honor her memory, to honor Master Lu's teaching, to honor the gift of music itself is to keep it alive, to share it, to teach it, to let it continue flowing through the world. That's beautiful, Sarah said. It is also practical, Mr. Chen added with a small smile. Music kept in silence helps no one. Music shared grows and multiplies. Look at us. A few months ago, I was a lonely old man who had not touched a piano in decades. You were a talented pianist going through the motions, losing your passion. Now we have both found something we did not know we were missing. 3 months after that first showcase, Mr. Chen received a call from his daughter. The baby was coming earlier than expected. He would need to fly to California to be there for the birth. I will be gone for a few weeks, he told Sarah. Will you keep practicing while I am away? Do not let yourself slip back into old habits, I promise, Sarah said. And maybe you could make a video of yourself playing for your grandchild? So they have it, you know, a record of their grandfather's gift. Mr. Chen's eyes grew misty. That is a good idea. A very good idea. The night before Mr. Chen left, the community center held a special recital. He played 3 pieces. The Chopin Nocturne that had marked his return to music, a Schubert impromptu, and the Chinese folk song arrangement he and Sarah performed as a duet. The room was packed with residents, staff, and visitors. At the end, the applause went on and on. As Sarah hugged him goodbye, Mr. Chen whispered, "Thank you for asking me to tell my story that day. Thank you for seeing in me not just an old man but a musician. You gave me back something I thought was lost forever." "You did the same for me," Sarah replied. "You reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place." Mr. Chen was gone for 3 weeks. During that time, Sarah maintained their practice schedule, working on pieces they had studied together and exploring new repertoire. She found herself thinking often about his stories, about the mental practice during the Cultural Revolution, about the decades of silence, about finding one's way back to beauty after loss. She started keeping a journal of her practice sessions, not just noting what she played, but what she felt, what images came to mind, what emotions she was trying to convey. It was something Mr. Chen had suggested, and she found it transformative. The act of putting her musical intentions into words helped clarify her artistic vision. During the third week of his absence, Sarah received a phone call from an unknown number. When she answered, she heard Mr. Chen's voice, excited in a way she had never heard before. "Sarah, I am a grandfather. A little boy, healthy and beautiful. They have named him William, but his Chinese name is Wei Lun, which means great order or great principle. My daughter wanted him to have a name that honors both his American and Chinese heritage. That's wonderful." "Congratulations, Mr. Chen. How are you feeling?" "Old and young at the same time," he said with a laugh. "Holding this tiny person, knowing he carries our family forward into the future, it is overwhelming. And I've been thinking about what we discussed, about legacy and what we pass down. I made that video you suggested," he continued. "I found a piano at my daughter's neighbor's house. They were kind enough to let me use it. I recorded myself playing several pieces and talking about the music. I told William about Master Liu, about the farm, about his grandmother. I want him to know where he comes from, what struggles and triumphs are part of his heritage. He'll treasure that one day," Sarah said warmly. "I hope so. But more than that, I realized something. I have been so focused on my own journey, on reclaiming my music, that I have not thought much about the broader picture. There must be other musicians like me, people who stopped playing for whatever reason, who think it is too late to return." "I want to do something about that." Sarah was intrigued. "What do you mean?" "When I return, I would like to start a group. At the community center, yes, but open to anyone. A place where people can come together to make music, regardless of age or skill level. Not for performance, not for competition, just for the joy of it." "What do you think?" "I think it's a brilliant idea," Sarah said immediately. "I'll help you set it up." When Mr. Chen returned, he brought photos of baby William and enough energy for 3 people. He and Sarah met with Mrs. Patterson to discuss the idea. She was enthusiastic and offered the community center's main hall every Saturday afternoon for what they decided to call the Rediscovery Music Group. They put up flyers at local libraries, senior centers, and music shops. The first meeting drew 7 people. 3 retirees who had played instruments in their youth, a middle-aged woman recovering from a stroke who wanted to rebuild her piano skills, a teenager whose family couldn't afford private lessons, and 2 complete beginners who had always wanted to learn. It was a motley group, but Mr. Chen approached it with the same dedication he had brought to his conservatory teaching decades earlier. He assessed each person's level and goals, then created a loose curriculum that would allow them to work at their own pace while also learning from each other. Sarah found herself co-teaching, helping the beginners with basic technique while Mr. Chen worked with the more advanced students on interpretation. The Saturday sessions became loud and chaotic and absolutely joyful. People who had never met before became friends, bonding over their shared love of music and their shared struggles with difficult passages. The stroke survivor, a woman named Patricia, was particularly inspiring. Her right hand had been significantly weakened, and she had to completely relearn how to play. Mr. Chen worked with her patiently, adapting pieces to accommodate her limitations while still maintaining musical integrity. Music therapy, they call it now, Mr. Chen told Sarah one day while watching Patricia practice. But it is more than therapy. It is reclamation of self. When stroke takes away your ability to play, it takes away part of your identity. Learning to play again is not just about moving fingers. It is about proving to yourself that you are still whole, still capable of creating beauty. The teenager, Marcus, had a natural talent but lacked discipline. Mr. Chen took him under his wing, sharing stories about the importance of regular practice, but also teaching him about musicality and expression. "Technical skill without soul is meaningless," he told Marcus. "But soul without technical skill cannot fully express itself. You must develop both." As word spread about the Rediscovery Music Group, more people joined. The Saturday sessions sometimes had 15 or 20 participants. They started organizing informal recitals where members could share what they were working on in a supportive, non-judgmental environment. One Saturday, a local newspaper reporter visited after hearing about the group. She interviewed Mr. Chen about his background and his philosophy. The resulting article, titled "Finding Music Again: How One Man's Journey Inspired a Community," ran with a photo of Mr. Chen and Sarah at the piano, surrounded by group members. The article brought even more attention. A local music school reached out, offering to donate sheet music and practice aids. A piano tuner volunteered to maintain the community center's instrument for free. Former professional musicians started showing up to share their knowledge with the group. 6 months after the group's founding, they organized a full recital at a local church with better acoustics than the community center. Every member performed, from the newest beginner playing a simple scale exercise to Mr. Chen performing a complex Rachmaninoff prelude. The church was packed with family members, friends, and community supporters. Sarah performed too, playing the Debussy prelude that Mr. Chen had helped her transform from a technical exercise into an artistic statement. As she played, she thought about how much had changed since that afternoon when she had first volunteered at the community center. She had come expecting to play simple accompaniment. Instead, she had found a mentor, a purpose, and a renewed connection to the music she loved. After the recital, during the reception, Sarah overheard Mr. Chen talking with Patricia, the stroke survivor. Patricia was crying happy tears. "I never thought I would play again," she was saying. "The doctor said I should accept it and move on. But you showed me that it's never too late, that with patience and dedication we can reclaim what we thought was lost." Mr. Chen's response was simple, but profound. "The music was always in you. It never left. You just needed to find the path back to it." Later that evening, after everyone had left and they were helping clean up the church, Mr. Chen turned to Sarah. "You know, when I played that Chopin nocturne 8 months ago, I thought I was simply honoring my wife's memory. I did not realize I was starting something much bigger." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I thought I was playing for myself, maybe for my future grandchild. But look at what has grown from that single performance. This group, these people who have found music again or found it for the first time. Patricia playing despite her stroke, Marcus developing discipline, you rediscovering your passion, and me, an old man who thought his useful years were behind him, finding purpose again." He paused, his eyes growing distant with thought. Master Liu used to say that music is like water. It needs to flow. If you dam it up, it becomes stagnant. But if you let it flow, it nourishes everything it touches. For 27 years, I dammed up the music inside me. When I finally let it flow again, I did not realize how far that flow would reach. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. "You've changed so many lives, Mr. Chen, including mine." "And you changed mine," he replied. "You asked me to tell my story. You showed interest in an old man's past. That simple act of attention, of genuine curiosity, was what I needed to believe my story mattered, that I still had something to offer." They stood in the empty church, the last lights being turned off around them, two pianists who had found each other at exactly the right moment. Sarah thought about the interconnectedness of it all. If she hadn't volunteered that day, if Mr. Chen hadn't had that dream about Master Liu, if his daughter hadn't announced her pregnancy, if he had chosen any other piece besides that Chopin nocturne, any one of these moments could have gone differently, and they would never have met. A few weeks later, Sarah received a package in the mail. Inside was an old photograph carefully preserved in a frame. It showed a young Mr. Chen at a piano, probably in his 20s, his face intense with concentration. Next to him stood an elderly man with stern features and kind eyes. On the back, in Mr. Chen's careful handwriting, was a note. "Dear Sarah, this is Master Liu and me, taken in Shanghai in 1968, just before the conservatory closed. I thought you should have this, as you have become a link in the chain of teaching that Master Liu began. He taught me. I taught students at the conservatory, and now I teach you." The music continues. "Thank you for asking an old man to play again. With gratitude, James Chen." Sarah set the photograph on her piano at home, where she saw it every time she practiced. It reminded her that every musician is part of a larger story, part of a tradition that stretches back through centuries. And every time someone picks up an instrument after a long absence, every time someone discovers music for the first time, every time someone shares their knowledge with another, that tradition grows stronger. The simple tune that Mr. Chen was told to play had become something far more significant. It had become a catalyst for transformation, a bridge between past and future, a reminder that it is never too late to reclaim the things that make us whole. And in the end, that was the greatest lesson Mr. Chen taught Sarah. that music, like life itself, is not about perfection or recognition or even success. It is about connection, about expressing what words cannot say, about creating beauty even in the face of loss and hardship, and most importantly, it is about sharing that beauty with others so the music never stops flowing. William Chen, now 6 months old, sleeps in his crib in California with a mobile playing Chopin's Nocturne above his head. One day he will grow up and learn about his grandfather, the pianist who survived revolution and loss, who found his way back to music after decades of silence. He will watch those videos and see the joy in his grandfather's face as aged hands create beauty, from ivory and wood. And perhaps if the chain continues as chains do, William will pick up an instrument himself, not because he has to, but because he wants to. Because somewhere in his heart, he will recognize that music is not just sound. It is memory, heritage, resilience, and love, passed down through generations waiting to be rediscovered over and over again.